Hello dear students, today we are going to discuss the topic on radiodating. The main objectives of the topic are: first, to give basic knowledge about radiodating; second, to study different methods of radiodating and to understand advantages and limitations of different radiodating techniques. Now, let's first start with introduction. The aging process in human beings is easy to see. As we age, our hair turns grey, our skin wrinkles, and our metabolism slows. However, rocks and other objects in nature do not give off such obvious clues about how long they have been around. So, we rely on dating techniques to calculate their ages. Dating techniques are procedures used by scientists to determine the age of an object or a series of events. The two main types of dating methods are relative and absolute. Relative dating methods are used to determine only if one sample is older or younger than another. Absolute dating methods are used to determine an actual date in years for the age of an object. The most widely used and accepted form of absolute dating is radiodating. Radiodating or radioactive dating is a method used to date rocks and other objects based on the known decay rate of radioactive isotopes. Now, coming to the principle of radiodating. Radiodating is based on the decay of naturally occurring radioactive isotopes. Decay rates of radioactive isotopes depend on nuclear properties and are independent of changing external conditions like temperature, pressure, and chemical environment. In parent-daughter decay system, over time, the number of daughter atoms increases and the amount of parent atoms decreases as they decay away. The ratio of the parent atoms to the daughter atoms is a direct function of time, and if the half-life of system is sufficiently well known, by measuring this ratio, the age of material of interest can be measured. Now, let us discuss the methods of radiodating. There are different methods of radiodating that can be used to estimate the age of a variety of natural and even man-made materials. These methods vary due to the type of material that is being dated. There are now well over 40 different radiodating techniques, each based on a different radioactive isotope. Some of the radiodating techniques are: first, Potassium Argon. Potassium is an abundant element in the Earth's crust. One isotope, Potassium-40, is radioactive and decays to two different daughter products, Calcium-40 and Argon-40, by two different decay methods. This is not a problem because the production ratio of these two daughter products is precisely known and is always constant. 11.2% becomes Argon-40 and 88.8% becomes Calcium-40. It's possible to date some rocks by the potassium-calcium method, but this is not often done because it's hard to determine how much calcium was initially present. Argon, on the other hand, is a gas. Whenever rock is melted to become magma or lava, the argon tends to escape. Once the molten material hardens, it begins to trap the new argon produced since the hardening took place. In this way, the potassium-argon clock is clearly reset when an igneous rock is formed. A geologist simply needs to measure the relative amounts of potassium-40 and argon-40 to date the rock. However, in reality, there is often a small amount of argon remaining in a rock when it hardens. This is usually trapped in the form of very tiny air bubbles in the rock. Any extra argon from air bubbles may need to be taken into account if it is significant relative to the amount of radiogenic argon. This would most likely be the case in either young rocks that have had no time to produce much radiogenic argon, or in rocks that are low in the parent potassium. This is rather easily done because air argon has a couple of other isotopes the most abundant of which is argon 36. The ratio of argon 40 to argon 36 in air is well known at 295. Thus, if one measures argon 36 as well as argon 40, one can calculate and subtract of the air argon 40 to get an accurate age. One of the best ways of showing that an age date is correct is to confirm it with one or more different dating methods. Although potassium argon is one of the simplest dating methods, there are still some cases where it does not agree with other methods. When this happens, it's usually because the gas within bubbles in the rock is from deep underground rather than from the air. This gas can have a higher concentration of argon 40 escaping from the melting of older rocks. This is called parentless argon 40 because its parent potassium is not in the rock being dated and is also not from the air. In these cases, the date given by the normal potassium argon method is too old. However, scientists in the mid-1960s came up with a way around this problem, the Argon Argon method. Second, coming to the Argon Argon method. This method uses exactly the same parent and daughter isotopes as the potassium argon method. It's a different way of telling time from the same clock. Instead of simply comparing the total potassium with the non-air argon in the rock, this method has a way of telling exactly what and how much argon is directly related to the potassium in the rock. In the Argon Argon method, the rock is placed near the center of a nuclear reactor for a period of hours. A nuclear reactor emits a very large number of neutrons, which are capable of changing a small amount of the potassium 39 into argon 39. Argon 39 is not found in nature because it has only a 269-year half-life. The rock is then heated in a furnace to release both the argon 40 and the argon 39 for analysis. The heating is done at incrementally higher temperatures, and at each step the ratio of argon 40 to argon 39 is measured. If the argon 40 is from decay of potassium within the rock, it will come out at the same temperatures as the potassium-derived argon 39 in a constant proportion. On the other hand, if there is some excess argon 40 in the rock, it will cause a different ratio of argon 40 to argon 39. There are occasions when the Argon Argon dating method does not give an age even if there is sufficient potassium in the sample and the rock was old enough to date. This most often occurs if the rock experienced a high temperature at some point since its formation. The important point to note is that rather than giving wrong age dates, this method simply does not give a date if the system has been disturbed. This is also true of a number of other igneous rock dating methods. Now, next is Rubidium Strontium method. In the Rubidium Strontium method, rubidium-87 decays with a half-life of 48.8 billion years to strontium-87. Strontium has several other isotopes that are stable and do not decay. The ratio of strontium-87 to one of the other stable isotopes, say strontium-86, increases over time as more rubidium-87 turns to strontium-87. But when the rock first cools, all parts of the rock have the same strontium-87 to strontium-86 ratio because the isotopes were mixed in the magma. Rubidium has a larger atomic diameter than strontium, so rubidium does not fit into the crystal structure of some minerals as well as others. Several things can cause problems for the rubidium-strontium dating method. One possible source of problems is if a rock contains some minerals that are older than the main part of the rock. This can happen when magma inside the earth picks up unmelted minerals from the surrounding rock as the magma moves through a magma chamber. Another difficulty can arise if a rock has undergone metamorphism. That is, if the rock got very hot but not hot enough to completely remelt the rock. Now, coming to uranium, lead and related techniques. The uranium lead method is the longest used dating method. It was first used in 1907. The uranium lead system is more complicated than other parent-daughter systems. It's actually several dating methods put together. Natural uranium consists primarily of two isotopes, uranium-235 and uranium-238, and these isotopes decay with different half-lives to produce lead-207 and lead-206 respectively. In addition, lead-208 is produced by thorium-232. The uranium-lead system has an interesting complication. None of the lead isotopes is produced directly from the uranium and thorium. Each decays through a series of relatively short-lived radioactive elements that each decay to a lighter element, finally ending up at lead. Since these half-lives are so short compared to uranium-238, uranium-235 and thorium-232, they generally do not affect the overall dating scheme. The result is that one can obtain three independent estimates of the age of a rock by measuring the lead isotopes and their parent isotopes. The uranium-lead system in its simpler forms using uranium-238, uranium-235 and thorium-232 has proved to be less reliable than many of the other dating systems. This is because both uranium and lead are less easily retained in many of the minerals in which they are found. Yet, the fact that there are three dating systems all in one allows scientists to easily determine whether the system has been disturbed or not. Using slightly more complicated mathematics, different combinations of the lead isotopes and parent isotopes can be plotted in such a way as to minimize the effects of lead loss. One of these techniques is called the lead-lead technique because it determines the ages from the lead isotopes alone. This technique is used for age estimation of bone, lacustrine deposits, peat and coral. Now, coming to cosmogenic radionuclides, that is carbon-14, beryllium-10 and chlorine-36. Unlike the radioactive isotopes discussed above, these isotopes are constantly being replenished in small amounts in one of two ways. Uranium-234 and thorium-230 are replenished as the long-lived uranium-238 atoms decay. The other three, carbon-14, beryllium-10 and chlorine-36, are produced by cosmic rays and photons in space as they hit the Earth's upper atmosphere. Very small amounts of each of these isotopes are present in the air we breathe and the water we drink. As a result, living things, both plants and animals, ingest very small amounts of carbon-14, and lake and sea sediments take up small amounts of beryllium-10 and chlorine-36. The cosmogenic dating clocks work somewhat differently than the others. To a rough approximation, the ratio of carbon-14 to the stable isotopes carbon-12 and carbon-13 is relatively constant in the atmosphere and living organisms and has been well calibrated. Once a living thing dies, it no longer takes in carbon from food or air, and the amount of carbon-14 starts to drop with time. How far the carbon-14 to carbon-12 ratio has dropped indicates how old the sample is. Since the half-life of carbon-14 is less than 6,000 years, it can only be used for dating material less than about 45,000 years old. Radiocarbon dating was first explored by W.R. Libby, who later won the Nobel Prize. Materials that have been radiocarbon dated since the inception of the method include charcoal, wood twigs, seeds, peat, pollen, resins, bones, shells, corals, hair, leather, and blood residues, lake mud, soil, water, pottery, wall paintings, fabrics, and paper. The carbon-14 dates have been carefully cross-checked with non-radiometric age indicators, for example, growth rings in trees. If counted carefully, are a reliable way to determine the age of a tree. The study of tree rings and the ages they give is called dendrochronology. Now, coming to thermoluminescence. There is a way of dating minerals and pottery that does not rely directly on half-lives. Thermoluminescence dating uses the fact that radioactive decays cause some electrons in a material to end up stuck in higher energy orbits. The number of electrons in higher energy orbits accumulates as the material experiences more natural radioactivity over time. If the material is heated, these electrons can fall back to their original orbits, emitting a very tiny amount of light. If the heating occurs in a laboratory furnace equipped with a very sensitive light detector, this light can be recorded. By comparison of the amount of light emitted with the natural radioactivity rate, the sample experienced, the age of the sample can be determined. Thermoluminescence dating can generally be used on samples less than 500,000 years old. Now, next is electron spin resonance dating. Also called electron paramagnetic resonance, electron spin resonance dating also relies on the changes in electron orbits and spins caused by radioactivity over time. However, electron spin resonance dating can be used over longer time periods, up to 2 million years, and works best on carbonates such as in coral reefs and cave deposits. It has also seen extensive use in dating tooth enamel. Next is cosmic ray exposure dating. This dating method relies on measuring certain isotopes produced by cosmic ray impacts on exposed rock surfaces. Because cosmic rays constantly bombard meteorites flying through space, this method has long been used to date the flight time of meteorites. The cosmic rays produce small amounts of naturally rare isotopes such as neon-21 and helium-3, which can be measured in the laboratory. The cosmic ray exposure ages of meteorites are usually around 10 million years, but can be up to a billion years for some iron meteorites. In the last 15 years, people have also used cosmic ray exposure ages to date rock surfaces on the Earth. This is much more complicated because the Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere shield us from most of the cosmic rays. Cosmic ray exposure calibrations must take into account the elevation above sea level because the atmospheric shielding varies with elevation, and must also take into account latitude, as the magnetic shielding varies from the equator to the poles. Nevertheless, terrestrial cosmic ray exposure dating has been shown to be useful in many cases. With this, we come to the conclusion of today's lecture. Thanks for watching.